have said before that Connie is my go-to person when it comes to Christian counseling. She is a vice president here at the university who oversees our student affairs. Connie is a deeply devout Christian woman, married to a wonderful man. I'll say it twice, a wonderful man, so you can tell Tim I said that. She served at Illinois Wesleyan. She has served for nearly 2 decades here at Pepperdine. She understands what's happening, and I wanted her to talk about specifically anxiety and teen suicide and caring for the mental health of your youth. So thank you, Dr. Horton. Thank you, Connie, for being here. Wow. After hearing what Dudley's talked about, help us care.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff, and thanks everybody for being here, for caring. I'm going to zip through some basic information. Roll with me. I'm going to go really fast just to get it out there, and then I'll end with a few practical suggestions and be happy to entertain questions if we have time.
Please do chat in your questions. That's helpful to us.
Yeah. So in the college world, I'll speak of the college world first because I want you to think about how you're preparing students for their young adult lives. This book came out in 2005 that was talking about how mental health stuff was increasing dramatically. And I'd like to tell you, oh, that was then and so much better now. But more recent data says, no, this cohort is having escalating mental health problems, more depression, weaker social skills. Counseling center directors all report that they have higher and higher levels of mental health concerns and lots of suicides, completed suicides on campus. One article put it this way: mental health concerns are increasing in frequency, severity, and complexity. That's definitely been our experience here, and Christian universities and youth groups are not exempt from these trends. Our numbers go up dramatically, and it's not just the clients. Some people say, oh, it's just the taboo. Nope, mental health, if you just survey general teen populations or college populations, way up. Yes, anxiety is increasing in America, in the United States in particular, but it's increasing more for this Gen Z generation. Real quickly, what is anxiety? I trust you know, basically, but it is the number one that is increasing, the number one increasing mental health struggle. Think about what it looks like. Some people might come to you, some teens might come to you saying, I struggle with anxiety. I'm on meds for anxiety. Other ones won't know what it is yet. Maybe they're having panic attacks. Maybe they're doing avoidant behaviors. They're not coming to youth group because they're socially anxious. They're not going to school because they have academic anxieties, etc. You'll also see anxiety underneath a lot of the, if you will, acting out behaviors that are trying to turn off the anxiety. Things that look more like substance abuse, self-injury, eating disorders, and even suicidal thinking is often a way, can I turn it off, even if it's destructive? The way I explain to students often is like a lion's in the room. You say you can't sleep. Could you sleep if there was a lion in the room? You say you're having trouble reading. Could you if there's a lion in the room? Your system is cranked up and you're going to have trouble with all those. Depression, as I'm sure you know, low mood, lack of enjoyment, trouble with sleeping and eating, cognitive distortions like helplessness, and yes, suicidal thinking. What do you think's going on here? If we had more time, I'd love a discussion. If we have time at the end, we can. But to just put it in a nutshell, one of the things that's happening societally is more threat, greater threats and more attention to the threats. Think about the millions of things young people are concerned about today: economics, terrorism, climate change, disasters all around. It's just constant, and they have access to it all the time. Surprise, surprise, kids growing up with, active shooter drills, they have anxiety around these things. They're worried about the suicide rates of their friends and the suicide concerns of their friends. They're worried about climate change, et cetera. Again, more than other generations. So increased threat is one. Increased use of technology is another one. If you haven't read this book, you should, by Jean Twenge, iGen, just documents so powerfully the connection with social media, especially technology in general, and the destruction of mental health. Don't underestimate it. All kinds of things, from the speed of life, comparison, multitasking, sleep deprivation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then finally, before I get to families briefly, decrease social support. So overall, kids are feeling a greater sense of threat. Technology is escalating that. And then they have fewer deep connections. They might be busy with a quote unquote social life, but that is different than having people who know you, get your fears, get your dreams, support you, pray with you, etc. Families are anxious too, and they're tending to overpressure and overprotect right now. And of course, pressuring leaves little time for healthy growing up stuff like relaxation, play, and healthy family rituals. Overprotecting, you've heard all that, I'm sure, helicopter parenting, snowplow parenting, et cetera, making sure that their little angels do not have any disappointments. And what that ends up with is they get on in life and disappointments happen and it doesn't go well because they're not prepared. I often show this little graphic that they've been raised to expect if they're overprotected, this easy life. And in truth, there's obstacles, storms, challenges, and they need to be prepared for that. So basically, they're lacking some of what I think of as psychological muscles, emotional regulation, like if I'm upset, how do I settle myself? And distress tolerance, to paraphrase M. Scott Peck, accepting that life is hard. And once you accept that, it's not so hard. And then we have COVID. So let's just throw that in the mix. And so think about it. COVID would increase all those things. COVID has increased the sense of threat. And there's a few other threats going on right now. It's decreased the ability to be with your social support outside of, in some settings at least. And it's led to more technology use. So no surprise, if those are three of the biggest things that cause mental health challenges, we would expect that mental health challenges would increase under COVID. So what can you do in a nutshell? And then let's open it up. I'd love to discuss this with you. Listen well. Never underestimate the power of listening well, and never overestimate your listening skills. Many people think they listen well and they don't. If you're not sure, I'd invite you to connect with a clinician, practice, make sure. That's huge. They need that deep social support, not just where were you Wednesday? Can you join us to this? But really listening to them. And then beyond that, give them practical skills. At Pepperdine, we're working on a resilience-informed skills education program we're calling RISE. And we're thinking they need to learn these skills. We cannot assume they need it. If you can teach these earlier and walk beside them as they develop them, that's huge. Physically, do you sleep, eating, exercise? Do you talk about that? Do you talk about being a good steward of your body? Can you walk if it's safe to do so while you're meeting with a teen? Do you talk about the importance of a good night's sleep and how God created us, needing rest? And don't ignore that. Socially, man, scripture's so full of we were created for one another. We're created to be in the body. We're created for relationship. And some of them really need to be reminded of that. And then some need social skills nudging. They don't know how to start the conversation. They're nervous to be there. They don't have empathy skills. Things that you could do to teach those in practical ways could make a big difference. Cognitively, learning that idea that life is hard. I think that's a gift you give people. If you just let them know, like, yeah, welcome to the human condition. Jesus said something about this, didn't he? In this world, you will have tribulation. Like, that's the world we live in. There will be storms. There will be obstacles. Expect that. And then expect that you can navigate that. By the grace of God, with the support of this faith community, et cetera, you can navigate hard times. Part of what can help with that cognitively is developing a growth mindset. I'd encourage you to look that up. Carol Dweck, if you're not familiar, out of Stanford. Instead of having a fixed mindset, I suck at math, I'm no good at art, I'm just a hot-headed person, I don't share my feelings. Instead, could you shift that to a growth challenge? Like, I'm going to use some tutoring to learn math better. I'm going to take some anger management skills. I'm really praying about my ability to empathize more with others, whatever. And then finally, irrational or unbiblical thoughts, learning to counter them. Thoughts like, I have to please everyone, perfectionism, I can read people's mind and I got to keep everybody happy, worrying too much about the future, etc. If they can learn to combat that. You could just take 3 or 4 in a great youth group discussion. Let's talk about, what does scripture say about this? Is this rational? Why do we think this? How in the moment could you combat it? That'd be good. And then I think of all of this as spiritual, of course, but I also think teaching them explicit spiritual practices. What I found in all my years working at the counseling center is many of our Christian students would check on the paperwork. I'm a Christian, it's very important to me. But when they talked about the struggle that they were having, you would never know it. Help them learn how to make the connections, to see God in it, in the struggle, to develop a repertoire of spiritual practices. Could I do breath prayer? Could I do Lectio Divina? Could I do other habits and practices that would help me settle myself and embrace having God walk beside me and bringing God into my darkest times, instead of like, okay, never mind God, I'll deal with you later, I'm having a struggle. Life skills, what we mean by that at Pepperdine is helping them with time management, money management, and technology discernment. So I would think some of those are relevant. And last but not least, service. And of course, many of you do that so well. And just help counter. If people say, I'm too busy, I'm too stressed, I'm too anxious, I can't help you with the soup kitchen, with the Habitat House, with the mission trip. This isn't the only reason to do it, of course, but the research actually shows it's good for us when we do that. No surprise, right? It gives us perspective taking, a social connection, meaning making, etc. So nudge people, including their parents, if they're saying, oh, I think she's too stressed to do any service. Finally, I would be remiss if I don't explicitly say regarding suicide, if you have a question, if one of your teens may be struggling, ask them directly. If you ever wonder if you should ask, that means you should ask. And just get used to asking it. Say it very straightforwardly, something like, you seem really discouraged lately. I wonder if it ever gets so bad that you think about killing yourself. Just be direct. It's hard, practice it, let it roll off your tongue. But you will not give them the idea, and they won't say, oh, never thought of it, now I will. Like, I don't know what we're so afraid of. It's an uncomfortable conversation for some, but it's critical and could be life-saving. Real suicide completions are increasing. You could save a life by asking a question. If you're not sure, seek consultation, of course, with your elders, with other ministers, with mental health folks. In most cases, unless you believe it to be an abusive situation, of course, you're going to talk to the parents. And let's recognize there's time for 911. If somebody's already ingested pills, if somebody's talking about having a weapon nearby, etc., don't hesitate. Do not hesitate. So I'm ending on a depressing note too, but I hope that gives some practical things. And I'd be happy to just kick this around for a little bit if we have time, Jeff.
Yes, well, you may call that depressing, but it is so encouraging and inspiring to say, okay, there are things that we can do. One question that Jessica Knapp texted in or chatted in had to do with how to teach the kind of resilient skills that you're talking about.
Basically, I would say be very practical about it. Like, you could talk to the students, you could do a series, or you could partner with a mental health person in your congregation if they're open to it. But think about it like a toolbox, and that each week for a while, we're going to put tools into the toolbox. And you could have actually various members of your congregation help. So for example, when you're talking about the physical, let's have somebody talk about exercise and what exercise does for mood. Let's talk about what it means to be a good steward of your body and the importance of sleep. Okay, now next week, let's talk about how you challenge these thoughts and how Satan's a roaring lion with lies to deceive you. Let's talk about how do you recognize when you're thinking in distorted and destructive ways, and let's put those tools in the toolbox. There's all kinds of resources available. If you want to write to me, I could give you other book recommendations, but I bet in many of your congregations you have people, if you just use that list of the 6 areas, I bet you have people who could help teach all of those. The basic thing last thing I'll say about that is you want to give people hope. Not like, oh, I'm just the one who's always, back to the growth mindset, right? Instead of saying, I'm the one who's always struggling. You know what? I'm going to help you develop a toolbox. I'm going to help you put all different kinds of tools in there. So next time you're struggling, you might go for a run, call a friend, do this spiritual practice, etc. You have tools that could help you in the moment.
Connie, when teens present with anxiety and frustration, how would you suggest parents should be looped into those conversations?
Yeah, I would check with the teen about are your parents involved and do they know and what has happened in the conversation so far. If it doesn't seem like an emergency or there's any health safety issues, I'm not saying the second they open up to you, you go running to parents. I think that could be counterproductive. But of course, if there are safety issues, I would not wait. But help them expand and maybe, just maybe, in some cases, their parents could be more helpful than they think. And many times, students will find out, you know what, their mom or dad also struggled in the past. And then, wow, that could open the conversation. Some families are not very open about sharing these things. Some are not very healthy about it, right? They might say it and they might say, pray it away, kind of like the sexual orientation issues, and they might just get shut down. And so then you want to empathize with that and maybe over time try to help the family. Those are some initial thoughts.
Well, Connie, you bring up what another questioner asked about. They said, as a youth ministry team, of course, they all have their own anxieties, and what the balance is between empowering transparency and oversharing.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, been there too, kind of thing. What tips would you have for youth ministries about that?
Yeah, I would think that youth ministers would probably use the same rule of thumb, or would be advised to use the same rule of thumb that therapists do, which is you have to be sure that you are sharing for their benefit. And that seems obvious, but sometimes it's like unintentionally our human side, we're kind of one-upping or, telling our story or whatever. Be sure, check yourself, check your motivations, and share the amount that you think would be helpful. I think sharing a little bit of the welcome to the human condition, pretty much every person relates to some seasons of anxiety and seasons of depression. If you yourself have navigated in a significant way and it's come to a healthy resolution at this point, or it's a journey that you walk, but you're able to find your equilibrium pretty readily, that could be helpful for somebody who, for example, has a clear physiological predisposition to struggle, to say, I get that. I have a little bit of that too. Here's what I found is helpful to me. Lead it back to the what is helpful thing. What you don't want to do is burden them or discourage them or at all have them think they've got to take care of you now, or that this becomes the big gossip, discussion for the youth group. But if it's like, yeah, I've had some anxious moments in my time. So have pretty much every adult friend I have, welcome to the human condition. We get anxious, we struggle, and it's worse when we're tired, when we're not exercising, when we're not making time for friends, when we're not spending time with God. We're going to be more anxious. And so I hear you, I care about you, etc. Kind of aside, but I do think this is very important. I need to be clear. Be very careful to not assume that just doing those basic things is going to be all anybody needs. There are some people who definitely need professional care, some people who need medication, some people's physiology or traumatic histories, et cetera, require more than just doing those other things. And all those other things are also good while you're doing therapy and, if needed, medications. So it's not an either or thing.
I just had somebody in the chat line, pop that in. They said, I see myself as a general practitioner, but I've got to depend on specialists.
Absolutely.
Is there a rubric you'd use for when to say to a teen or to a teen and their parents, I want to hook you up with a therapist?
Yeah. Look for chronicity or severity, meaning if it's just not getting better, you're doing all the basic things, you're helping them with some practices, you're helping them get physically active and make time for social connections, et cetera, and they just keep struggling, that would be a time. Or if it just seems severe and debilitating, if there's any safety questions, then for sure right away. So for some people, you can kind of see how it goes. And for other people, it's like, okay, you know what? I'm going to help you get a referral right away. One of my biggest pieces of advice along the way is, again, it's not an either or thing. Just because you make a referral, that doesn't mean you don't ever speak of it again. I think that happens sometimes. Ministers or professionals here in a university setting will be like, ooh, okay, get you to a counselor. And then like, they don't ever speak of it again. It is fine to say, how's that going? How are you feeling? I've been praying for you, those kind of things.
That's a super important comment. Not just to ignore it once you've made that referral. Well, Dr. Horton has agreed to answer your email questions. In fact, she's said that she will do 5 hours of counseling with any one student that you have in your youth.
Right.
Okay, maybe not. Maybe
I got a
not.
deal for you.
Such a deal. Such a deal. Hey, God bless you, Connie. Thank you for the work that you do. I look forward to having you back again. Every time we have her on one of these calls, there's always great questions, and you can tell why the students love this lady who used her gifts and skills in that way. Again, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Horton.
Thank you.